And do you know what the Liberals estimated the total cost per year of the carbon tax for Canadian farmers to be? I do. And like so much of what the Liberals think and say and do these days, it just doesn't line up with reality.
The biggest challenge as a farmer for me is going to be the carbon pricing, because agriculture is pretty much the only industry where we don't get to pass on that additional cost to our operation. So carbon pricing is going to be an extremely challenging bill for a lot of farmers to be able to deal with.
She can't raise the price of her grain or she'll be forced out of the market. So maybe this explains why you've got all the prairie premiers basically saying, or most of them saying, we don't want a carbon price. How do you win over farmers like her?
Look, if anyone understands the impacts of climate change, it's farmers. Our system will give more money back to residents of that province than they will pay, and it will create the incentives for innovation. And I've seen amazing innovations in farming, for example. Zero-till agriculture, using less water, using smart technologies, artificial intelligence to, figure out how you can use less fertilizer, how you can, do a better job tilling, how you can get better results. We can all do this, but if we don't, the impact will be dire on farms.
Holy cow. That was Canada's Environment Minister Catherine McKenna appearing earlier this year on CBC's Power and Politics. And she's pretty misinformed when it comes to the reality that Canadian farmers are facing. I mean, just look at the pretentious way she tried to explain to Meg Reynolds, an actual grain farmer in Saskatchewan, about how to farm, better. But hang on here. I'm about to do something slightly out of character for myself and maybe a little crazy, but I might excuse Catherine McKenna's total ignorance given the documents she's been relying on from within her own ministry, because I've read the 19-page environment and climate change briefing notes on the impact of the carbon tax on Canadian agriculture. It was released to us as part of a proactive release of access to information documents. It's only 19 pages long, which is really shocking considering in 2016, according to Agriculture Canada numbers, there were 2.3 million people employed in the agricultural sector, contributing $112 billion with a B dollars to Canada's gross domestic product. 19 pages of analysis are all they did before the Liberals brought the hammer down on Canadian farms with a federally imposed carbon tax. Just think about that for a second. 19 pages. We will post the release for you to look at on your own, so you can fact check me if you like. What we learned from it is the Liberals are downplaying the damage their carbon tax would do to Canadian farms. It's almost like the Liberal Party is made up and directed by a bunch of disconnected Laurentian classists who think food comes from the organic grocery store. Now let's look at the Liberals' predictions for the cost of the carbon tax on Canadian farmers as found in this Access to Information release package. The numbers start here on page 8. Farms in Canada would see an average increase of $718 or 0.2% of their net operating costs and a decrease of 1% to their net operating income. Even that amount, yanked from farming families, is atrocious. Can you afford to take over $700 out of your family's bank account and just hand it over to Catherine McKenna's pet green causes? Will the government still force farmers to give that up when their crop yields are lower? Now on page 9, decreases in net operating income range from 0.3% for oilseed and dairy farms to 5% for greenhouses. But that estimated amount of damage appears to be far too low at just 0.3%, because this year the carbon tax is choking farmers fighting against early snow and cold, wet weather. Just look at this from the Western Producer back in September. One Saskatchewan farmer, Glenn Helgeson, estimated that he'll be doling out $3,700 in just carbon tax for just drying down his grain on his farm near Foam Lake. Glenn is quoted as saying, "I'm having a tough enough fall as it is with harvest, and then because the federal government wants to save the world, they're throwing an 18.6% increase at me. It's going to Ottawa, for Ottawa, to send checks out to the general public to buy their votes with my money. Amen, Glenn, amen. And Glenn's not the only farmer speaking out. Again, let's stick with the Western producer just for a minute. This article notes that while the federal carbon price, it's a tax, by the way, offers relief for gasoline and light fuel costs using tractors and trucks, there is no exemption for grain drying or heating, as in, when the big brains in the federal government performed this analysis on the economic impact of the carbon tax on Canadian farms, it looked like the skilled analyzers never once considered that farmers use grain dryers. A lot. The article quotes the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities' estimates of the carbon tax at anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 extra dollars per farm. Conservative MP Larry Maguire posted one Saskatchewan farmer's carbon tax bill. Again, someone who is drying their grain. You see that? $663.14 in federal carbon tax charges, including, of course, the GST on the carbon tax charge. And it's not just Western farmers speaking out. Yesterday, the Grain Farmers of Ontario, an organization representing 28,000 grain and oilseed farmers in Ontario, wrote a letter to the Prime Minister begging for relief from what they describe as a crippling carbon tax. The letter is heart-wrenching to read. Until this week, harvest conditions were already difficult. The snow and rain received this week makes the situation even worse. Because harvested grain is wetter than normal, it must be dried for longer than usual, meaning that more natural gas and propane must be used. Ontario farmers' costs for drying grain are double what they would be in a normal year, even before the carbon tax is added to the bill. These costs and stress are all on top of depressed prices and the de facto ban on imports by China of soybeans and other grains from Canada. This is not only impacting farmers' bottom lines, mental health helplines set up to aid farmers are reporting record increases of calls from farmers who cannot manage the stress. The carbon tax on fuel used to dry down grains is one more cost that farmers who operate on a narrow margin will have to absorb and will not be able to get from the supply chain. Farmers cannot afford this additional cost this year. The carbon tax on fuel used for grain drying is something you and your government can control. I am pleading with you to assist farmers immediately. Please exempt this tax for farmers in Ontario. These desperate pleas of struggling and anguished farmers will probably fall on deaf ears. Why? Because the Liberals have promised that everyone needs to fit into how we're doing this transition. Here is Catherine McKenna again, just yesterday, promising that her carbon taxing agenda will not subside. Just watch.
Of course we need to figure out how do we bring the country together. There is no bigger issue than national unity, but we also need to tackle climate change, and we can do this. We can figure out how we get our resources to market, how we transition to a cleaner future, and ideally we bring people together. And that's something I just really hope that we can do that, because we have a huge opportunity. It's a big challenge, but Canada's a great country, and this is a huge economic opportunity for jobs. And I do think we always have to be mindful that there are people, workers in Alberta and Saskatchewan and other places that are worried about how they fit in, and they need to fit in. Everyone needs to fit into how we're doing this transition, but we can do it, and I really, really hope that we can find a way to come together as a country.
Did you hear that? McKenna still thinks her carbon tax is a huge economic opportunity. For her, maybe, but not for businesses, farmers, and families like yours and like mine. What an injustice this carbon tax is. It hurts farmers the most precisely when they are already hurting through no fault of their own, when the cold weather betrays their best laid plans. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. At The Rebel, we are fiercely independent. We promise we'll never take a dime in financial support from the government. However, because of that, we rely on the support of viewers like you at home. Now, one of the best ways to support us while getting a little something in return for yourself is to treat yourself to a Rebel subscription. You will get access to all of our premium content as well as my weekly full-length show. It airs on Wednesday, but you can watch it whenever you want because this is the internet and that's how it works. Just go to premium.rebelnews.com.